Cultural materialism is a way of studying literature, especially historical texts like Shakespeare's plays, by looking at them through a political and historical lens. British critic Graham Holderness called it a politicized form of historiography, which means cultural materialism studies history, including literature, with an awareness of how politics and power influence culture both in the past and present. The term cultural materialism became widely used in 1985 when Jonathan Dollimore and Alan Sinfield used it in their book Political Shakespeare. They explained that cultural materialism has four key parts. First, historical context. Historical context looks at the time and events when a text was written, such as social struggles or political issues, rather than seeing the work as timeless or universal. Second, theoretical method. Theoretical method uses theories like structuralism and post-structuralism to understand literature rather than older humanist approaches. Third, political commitment. Political commitment takes sides on issues like class, gender, and power, often using Marxist or feminist ideas. Finally, textual analysis, which carefully studies the text itself, especially well-known works like those by Shakespeare, to challenge traditional views. The term culture in cultural materialism means not just classic works, but also popular culture like music or TV. The term materialism is the idea that culture is shaped by economic and political systems. It does not exist in a vacuum or come just from the artist's imagination. This view comes from Marxist thinking. Cultural materialism is also interested in how works like Shakespeare's are used today. For example, how schools, theatres, and publishers present Shakespeare. This helps us understand how culture supports or challenges current power structures. The goal is not just to study the past, but to use it to understand today's world, including what we choose to remember or forget. This approach was inspired in part by critic Raymond Williams, who talked about structures of feeling, which means the emotions and values people actually experience in daily life. Literature often expresses these feelings, which can resist dominant beliefs or political systems. Cultural materialism and new historicism are two similar ways of studying literature, especially old texts like Shakespeare's plays. Cultural materialism started in Britain, while new historicism began in the United States. Though they are closely related, they have some important differences, like members of the same family who often argue. In the book Political Shakespeare, Dollimore and Sinfield explain these differences. First, they quote Karl Marx, "Men and women make their own history, but not in conditions of their own choosing." This means people shape history, but they do so under difficult circumstances. Cultural materialists focus on how people try to take action and make change. New historicists focus more on the systems of power and society that limit people's freedom. So cultural materialism is generally more hopeful about change, while new historicism is more cautious or pessimistic. Second, cultural materialists think new historicists are too influenced by post-structuralism, a way of thinking that doubts whether we can really know the truth. Because of this, new historicists often question language, truth, and knowledge. Cultural materialists believe this makes it hard to take strong political positions. New historians respond by saying that Knowing the limits of truth does not mean they give up on finding it. Instead, they keep searching carefully, aware of the challenges, like a sailor navigating dangerous waters carefully rather than ignoring the risks. Third, they differ in what kind of historical material they study alongside the literature. New historians usually look at texts from the same time as the work they are studying, like other writings from Shakespeare's era. Cultural materialists might study modern sources like theatre program notes, quotes from soldiers, or government speeches, anything that shows how Shakespeare is used today. In other words, new historicism focuses on the past, while cultural materialism uses the past to understand the present. All these differences come down to topics. Cultural materialism is more active and focused on using literature to understand and change today's world. New historicism is more focused on exploring how power worked in the past and how it still echoes today. What cultural materialist critics do? Cultural materialists read literary texts, often plays from the Renaissance like Shakespeare's, in a way that helps us understand the history of exploitation and oppression that shaped those works when they were written. At the same time, they point out how modern ways of presenting these works, like treating Shakespeare as a national hero or part of a grand historical tradition, have helped hide those difficult histories. Cultural materialists combine ideas from Marxism and feminism to do this, especially to challenge the old-fashioned conservative ways people used to interpret Shakespeare, which often ignored issues of power, class, and gender. They closely analyze the text, but they also use newer methods from structuralism and post-structuralism to break away from the traditional conservative way of doing close reading. Even though they want to challenge the system, they still mostly focus on well-known literary works, the canon, because writing about little-known texts rarely has a strong impact. For example, when arguing about what should be taught in schools or what counts as part of national culture. An informal example of cultural materialist criticism can be seen in Terence Hawkes' essay Thelma, found in his book That Shakespearean Rag. This essay is the fourth in the book, where each chapter focuses on a major Shakespeare critic from the early 20th century. The overall idea of the book is to explore how Shakespeare is interpreted and presented to us today. In this chapter, Hawkes focuses on John Dover Wilson, who is best known for his 1930s book, What Happens in Hamlet. The first part of the essay looks at Hamlet and points out patterns in the play, like how it begins and ends in similar ways, how events and characters repeat, like father-son relationships, and how people already have expectations about the play before they watch it. Hawkes suggests that Hamlet has a shadow version running backward. This imagined reversed version is what he calls Thelma. The second part of the essay is titled To the Sunderland Station, a play on the book To the Finland Station, a history of the Russian Revolution. Here Hawkes imagines John Dover Wilson riding a train to Sunderland in 1917, sent by the British government to deal with problems in a munitions factory. On this train, Wilson reads an article by W. W. Gregg about Hamlet, which claims that King's reaction to the dumb show, a play within the play, is not straightforward, suggesting that King is more complex and not just a typical villain. This idea upset Wilson, who strongly believed Hamlet should remain the clear hero of the play. Hawkes connects Wilson's angry reaction to his strong desire for order. Wilson saw Russia as a simple, old-fashioned society and worried England might lose its traditional values. So when someone like Gregg challenged Hamlet's central role, Wilson rushed to defend him, trying to protect Shakespeare's image as a symbol of national culture. Hawkes also mentions that Wilson served on the Newbold Committee after World War I, which believed teaching English literature could help bring society together and prevent something like the Russian Revolution in Britain. He even includes a letter from Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, who praised Wilson's book, suggesting that Wilson's version of Hamlet fits a pattern of trying to avoid conflict and keep things the same. So Hawkes shows that the way we interpret Hamlet is deeply shaped by modern political and cultural concerns. In his final reading of the play's ending, Hawkes even adds a new stage direction, showing how criticism can change the text rather than just pass it on. He compares this to how a jazz musician plays music, not by repeating exactly what is written, but by transforming it creatively. Hawkes' style is unusual. His writing is lively, personal, and ignores many traditional academic rules. His chapters start dramatically, move suddenly from one topic to another, and reveal key points for maximum effect, more like storytelling than standard criticism. In this way, his work mixes literature with criticism, showing how both are deeply connected to today's world. Unlike New Historicism, which looks more at the original historical context, Hawkes's cultural materialism focuses more on the present and how we use Shakespeare today.